be in there. I mean, it's the most ridiculous, disgusting story. It was just made up.
All right, Ray Locker, who's an author and journalist from the United States, joins me live. Many thanks to you, Ray, for joining in. Does this ruling now only raise the basic sole concern about how much more will Donald Trump be paying to Jean Carroll in the upcoming civil trial of January?
There is how much he'll pay. My guess is if he pays anything, it's going to be a long time coming. He is going to drag this out as long as possible. I'm not sure if she's in it for the money, if she wants to do it to straighten out the record or whatever, but I think the money is probably the last thing that's going to happen in this case.
What do you make of what Jean Carroll had to say? She says that the second defamation case is nothing compared to the first one. She talks about the allegations coming from Donald Trump during the first one.
Well, I mean, he lost that case, and then he's supposed to not talk about it, and pretty much immediately out of the box, he's sullying her reputation again. Going to sue you. That's what Donald Trump does. I mean, he's pretty much a disgusting person. Regardless of the merits of her accusation, I mean, he just should have kept his mouth shut, and he didn't. And he just comes over, as he's done in virtually every instance we've talked about.
Absolutely. Also, as the early frontrunner for the 2024 Republican presidential nomination, how crucial is it going to be for Trump to seek delaying of the second trial now? Because reports are indicating that is something he wants.
He doesn't want to be in a court anytime before November of next year. I don't think. Yes, he has a commanding lead in the Republican polls right now. Noticing this groups where I like Trump, but there's just too much drama. And so when somebody really happened yet, I think you're going to see some movement to that.
Right. And as you're saying, this movement that's making, you know, there's a certain ecosystem, not just abroad, which believes that Trump will get away with legal. How do you counter that Trump can get away, because there's yes, he can still run for president behind bars?
Well, he's not going to be the nominee behind bars, and he's not going to get and if he is, by some stroke of luck, he's not going to be president from behind bars. I mean, this is one who is not universally popular. People in his own party, he's the most unpopular candidate out there. You know, notwithstanding President is primarily because of his age and concern with the economy. He's the worst out there. And so all this stuff is him, whether actually behind bars or not. He's probably never go behind bars, and you know, which is what people. But he's not going to get elected.
Leave all race. Then remember, you were debating over Ramaswamy. How do you see the Republican primary now shaping up, if that is the case, going by what you just said?
I don't see somebody, emerging right as a Trump. They had that on August 23rd, and that's the first initial shakeout. You know what you see, and some people did well, and some people didn't. I certainly don't think Vivek Ramaswamy is going to be the nominee. I think he's had his moment, because basically nothing he says makes sense, even though he's very convinced by his own logic. He's not swaying that many people. Nikki Haley did well in that debate. Ron DeSantis did okay in that debate, as well as Mike Pence, the former vice president. None of them has captured the imagination, however, of the Republican primary electorate. I think we're going to need to see some more debates over the next few months, some more movement, some more advertising to get a better sense of what's going to happen.
Right, Ray, let's leave it at that for now. I'm sure there'll be more traction on this case when January 15 arrives. Having said that, many thanks to you for joining in on News 18 Global. Now, Prime Minister Narendra Modi and US President Joe Biden are scheduled to hold bilateral talks tomorrow evening, this as per Indian Standard Time, just ahead of the G20 summit with a strong commitment to following COVID-19 protocol. Climate change, economic cooperation and multilateral development bank reform will be high on the agenda when Prime Minister Narendra Modi and US President Joe Biden hold a bilateral meeting in New Delhi on the sidelines of the G20 summit. Another issue that is now likely to figure prominently in the conversation between the two leaders is expected to be the Russia-Ukraine war. The agenda for the G20, particularly the economic cooperation and multilateral investment opportunities that stand for the G20, desire to see multilateral development bank reform and reshape might be discussed the that is a day. Meantime, so listen to Joe Biden. Also, White House has said during this.
Word. I got to keep wearing it, but don't tell them I didn't have it on when I did. All right.
This morning, Friday night, and he is the first lady is doing well as well, and she remains in, which is also a guidance record. Well, masking and my systems, the all he, of course, in with keeping with the Prime Minister Modi. During Prime Minister Modi's visit in June, as you've covered very closely, the President deliver on shared prior summit. Very much looking forward to continuing that work with the Prime as we
to rebuild up in the middle out by in the industries while tackling climate change and we believe that those we think countries around the world too from a similar type of approach, and that we can help them well investment to support them in tackling the challenges. Agenda of fundamental scale. We know that these institutions, the most tools we have, transparent, high quality investment into developing countries. The United States has championed the major effort to evolve these institutions of today and tomorrow.
South Asia, the Washington Post, Karish Malhotra joins me live with more inputs. Many thanks to you for joining in. Now, what are expected to be the key sticking points in Indo-US?
Sticking points, I think, actually, if you look at the priorities India's had as their talking points and what the U.S. has all had, they're mostly in cohesion, and that aligns with the fact that the larger relationship that the two have shown in the recent past seems to largely align. From what some people say is the best it's ever been, especially in terms of intelligence sharing and in terms of their geopolitical goals concerning specific are for the most part aligned. One sticking point, of course, could be the Russia-Ukraine war, which that war takes in the joy. The fact is, though, that the US and Europe probably took a harsher stance on wanting India to condemn the Russian invasion earlier on, and it's unclear if that's something that US would necessarily bring up in a bilat with now its close friend. Although when we discuss G20 overall, of course, that seems to be one of the main sticking points of the leaders together.
Right.
Some of the other sticking points could be around climate goals. We've seen reports that there's ongoing arguments from multiple sides that the similar stance for climate action plans shouldn't be applied to developing countries. So that might be another sticking point as well.
All right. Now, John Kirby has confirmed that U.S. is looking forward to warmly welcoming the African Union as a permanent member of the G20. Is this a key to India's success as the G20 president?
I think on the measures that India has determined for itself in labeling whether or not it's a success, surely I think that having India become a voice for the global South and within that roping in the African Union into the G20 is definitely a marker of success for India. I think it also is a signal that potentially India could try and divert as much attention as it can to A, the Russia-Ukraine war, and B, the fact that President Xi is not attending. So I think on those markers of success that India seems to be holding for itself, definitely having the US agree about the African Union coming in 2020 would definitely be a good sign for the country.
It's interesting, Karishma, that you mentioned that Xi is not going to be there, and considering President Xi will not be attending the summit, Chinese Premier Li Qiang, of course, as we all know, will be representing China at the G20 instead of President Xi. And this at a time when the Chinese economy is coping with sagging growth and a possible property debt crisis. Will Biden be at an advantage with emerging markets of the global South as Xi Jinping chooses to snub G20?
I'm not so sure that anyone's relationship with emerging economies entirely hinges on whether or not the president or the premier of China. I think actually much of that relationship depends more not on who's at the summit, but who's present on the ground in those emerging economies. In some of those emerging economies, China is much more present than the US, and in some of those, not so much. And also keep in mind that China does interact with those emerging markets in other forums, for example, BRICS and SEO, and BRICS has also recently expanded. So I think that I wouldn't hinge it entirely on that, but one way to look at it is Biden's advantage is not whether or not President Xi comes, but the fact that Biden himself gets to come. And there was speculation about hitting COVID, given the fact that his wife tested positive. So if he hadn't been able to come, I think that would have been the loss for America's international relations.
And how U.S. in fact steers reforming of the global banking system is also going to be extremely crucial for these emerging economies as we speak. Many thanks to you, Karishma Mehrotra, for bringing in those inputs to our show. Now, Japan has launched its lunar exploration spacecraft aboard a homegrown rocket, hoping to become the world's 5th country to land on the moon early next year and aiming to differentiate itself by performing a high accuracy landing. Japan has joined the race to the moon as well. Now, the lunar craft, officially known as Smart Lander for Investigating Moon, or SLIM, also referred to Sniper, was launched by the Japan Aerospace Exploration Agency. The SLIM spacecraft is expected to land on the moon's surface sometime in January or February next year after taking a long but more fuel-efficient path. If successful, Japan will become only the 5th nation after the US, China, Russia, and India as well. What makes Japan's attempt so unique is the fact that it is trying to pull off a precision landing on the moon within only 100 meters of a designated target using advanced image-based navigation. Now, an HIA rocket launch earlier this Thursday also carried an advanced X-ray imaging satellite on board as part of a joint mission with NASA. Here's more.
Japan has joined the race to the moon. Early Thursday, it launched a lunar lander from a spaceport in the south of the country. It's officially dubbed the Smart Lander for Investigating Moon, or SLIM. Less officially, it's called the Sniper. That's because Japan's space agency, JAXA, plans to land the craft within 100 meters of its target site. Agency President Hiroshi Yamakawa spoke after the launch.
Until now, moonlanders land where they could land on the moon. But from now on in the future, we will land on a spot where we want to, and that is what we're trying to prove.
Right now, the moon is getting to be a busy place. Some 2 weeks ago, a Russian probe crashed on approach. An Indian craft then successfully landed and deployed a rover. Japan's own lunar isn't right on the mission for JAXA and Japanese industry. The rocket that carried the lander aloft is made by Japan's Mitsubishi Heavy Industries, but the country's recent launches have been dogged by a series of failures, casting doubt on its space ambitions. Only the 5th country to land on the lunar surface. It would also bolster its hopes of playing a part in NASA's planned return to the moon later this decade. JAXA hopes the Moon Sniper will begin its touchdown in February next year.
The rocket is flying as planned. We have confirmed that about 14 minutes and 9 seconds after the launch, X-ray imaging and spectroscopy mission, and after about 47 minutes and 33 seconds, SLIM, Smart Lander for Investigating Moon, was separated. I believe it's positive and a good competition where many countries and private firms are exploring to land on the moon. JAXA obviously wants to realize many things in that competition. What is different with SLIM compared to other moon landers from different countries and private firms is that it's got very high technology to land precisely, like actualizing it within a 100-meter distance. Until now, moon landers land where it could land on the moon. But from now on in the future, we will land on a spot where we want to land. And that is what we are trying to prove.